Okay, welcome everyone to the APcsp checklist webinar. We're going to give just a minute or two to let people continue to join, and then we'll go ahead and start. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Lindsay Roberts. I'm a PD specialist here at CodeHS. I also was a APcsp teacher for several years before joining CodeHS, and I was an APcsp performance task grader for College Board for several years as well. So we're going to give you some information. Oh, and MR is here too. Sorry, MR. MR is with us too. She's going to be in the background answering questions in the Q&A. Throughout the webinar. So if you have any questions, you can use that Q&A to ask questions. The Q&A is in your Zoom tools at the bottom of your screen. You'll see one of them is Q&A. There is also a chat feature. You won't be able to chat to us, but you will be able to ask questions in the Q&A. MR will also be throwing some links in the chat as we go through things that might be useful for you to follow along with during the webinar. Okay, before we get started, just to go over our agenda really quickly, we're going to look at our different APcsp course offerings. We'll look at pacing in an APcsp classroom. This one is a little bit different because we do have that performance task at the end of the year. And then we'll look at preparing for that performance task. We'll look at some review material for the final exam. And then we'll look at how to complete your course audit. If you want to follow along on the slides, you can do that at that link, codehs.com/ap-csp-checklist-slides, or you can take a picture of that QR code on your phone. I'll leave this up for a second so you can do that if you choose. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. If you are not already logged in, you can log into your CodeHS account. If you do not have one, you can do that at codehs.com/sign up. You can sign for a free teacher account that way. You won't be verified as a teacher until we go in and manually verify you, so you won't have access to all of the teacher tools right away, but those will come once you are verified as a teacher. You don't need to necessarily follow along on your side. If you want to just watch the slides and then go back later and look at it on your side, that's totally fine too, up to you. So CodeHS, before we get started on the APcsp of it all, CodeHS is a comprehensive platform for teaching computer science. We have curriculum for elementary, middle, and high schools. We have online and offline professional development available, and we also have a full software platform with tools and resources for you. Our software platform has instant feedback for students. It has a submission system right in the website. There's grading and tracking tools for teachers. Some of those are for free teachers, some of them are for pro teachers, so it does depend on what level of account you have. But regardless, it is all web-based. It's all on our platform. You don't need to download any additional software. You don't need to download any plugins. All of that is included on the website. So if you have Chromebooks in your school, you can use CodeHS for this course. So we do have 3 different options for APcsp. Obviously, we're at the end of September, so likely you already know which one you're teaching. But just to give you a very broad overview of the 3 options in case you're thinking of maybe making a switch in the future, we'll look at those 3. I can find those at codehs.com/course/catalog. If I go there, I'll see every class that is offered, but I can look at the tags and pick APcsp courses. So this will give me all AP classes. That includes the APCSA and the APcsp. I will need to make sure I'm just looking at the principal's classes. So if I search by principles, I'll get those 3 options. And then a review course that we'll get to. So there are 3 different APCSP courses available. We have one in JavaScript, one in Python, and one that's considered the cybersecurity course. Both the JavaScript and Python are both 125 hours approximately. And then the cybersecurity is approximately 135 hours. So that is still in JavaScript, and it has all of the content from the JavaScript course. It just has some more information on cybersecurity. So if you have used the course in the past and you find that your students get through it quickly, you could think about using that cybersecurity course to give them some more practice in cybersecurity. We do also have a review course. So at the bottom of that, I'll see this review AP Computer Science Principles. This is just 15 hours. It's 1 unit. I can assign this to a class that already is rolling in CodeHS. I can add it to the end of a course. There are a couple of different ways I can do that. So if I'm already using one of these 3 courses and I want to add this review course at the end of the class, I can do that by clicking the Assign button. So from the course catalog, I find the review class, I click on Assign. It will let me pick what class I want to add it to. I can pick the course and then click Assign. It will add it to them. I also can just in my course, so if I'm in my assignments in my course, I can go to the Add button over here. So I have Edit and then Add. If I click Add, I get a drop down. I'm going to pick CodeHS course. And then from here, I can search for, again, I'll just search principles. And I'll see one of the options is the review. So I can click review. I can pick everything from that review course and I can add it to my class. So either way works. I can do it from the course catalog and click Assign, or I can go to my assignments in my actual course, click Add, and pick it from the CodeHS courses. So one important resource that we have is this Apcsp Hub. So if you go to codehs.com/apcsp, it will take you to the hub. And I have a lot of them open here. This one. And we're not going to look through this right away, but I will refer back to it a few times while we go through the webinar. So this is just something you can have open. It does have each of those courses. Again, I can learn more about any of those courses here. But we'll come back to the tutorials and the rest of this stuff later. So when we're looking at pacing, I want to look at the syllabus for the course. I can do that either from, and with a lot of stuff on the site, there's a lot of different ways to access the same material. So whichever way is easiest for you is the way you should do it. But I can, if I'm going to teach the JavaScript course and I want to look at the syllabus, I can do it right there by clicking View Syllabus. And I'll get the syllabus. The other way to do it is from my regular teacher page. On the left-hand side, I can click on Resources and then syllabi, and then I'll define my class and pick the syllabus from there. So I'll get the same thing. It looks like this. So I'll see in the syllabus, I have what a normal syllabus would have. And then when I get down here, I have some of the information from College Board. So these computational thinking practices and these big ideas are from College Board. If I wanted to look at College Board's framework, it is linked in the syllabus. So right here it says we recommend reading the framework. If I click on that, I'll get the AP College Board framework, which shows me all of the, down here I have big ideas. Here's the first big idea, creative development. So I can see how those link up there. After I get past all the big ideas, I will get to the course breakdown. So I'll get all of the units. It will tell me how long each of them will take. This one will take 3 weeks or 15 hours. We assume that you're getting about an hour a day, maybe a little bit less than that. And it shows me for this unit how it relates to the framework. So these are all the essential knowledges that it hits in this unit. And then I'll see what big idea it hits and what computational thinking practice it hits. And this is for all of the units. They all have the same idea. So one thing to note is that the curriculum framework from College Board is laid out in those 5 big ideas, but those are meant to be interwoven throughout the class. So there's not a one-to-one correspondence. You're not teaching big idea 1 in module 1 on our site. All those big ideas are just interwoven into the entire course. If you want to see how your course maps to your state standards, you can do that at codehs.com/states. This will be if your school requires you to show that you're mapping to each of your standards. You can do that here. Let's say, for example, I live in Georgia. I don't, but I'll pretend. This will give me a bunch of information about Georgia. And then at the bottom, I'll see all of the standards, and Georgia has a ton, all the standards that Georgia has. I can pick the one that I know I'm mapping towards. In this case, it's computer science principles. And this is not like a requirement. This is just if your school needs it. I can pick the course I'm going to teach, and it will show me how mapped I am to the standards that I'm looking to map to. So for this Georgia Computer Science Principles Standards, I'm 91% of the way mapped. I can see I have 51 standards mapped out of 56. I can show whoever needs to see that I'm mapping to all my standards with this, and then I would know that I need to fill in for these last 5 standards as I'm planning out my course. So again, that's at codehs.com/states, and then you just pick your state, pick the standards that you're trying to map to. As we're talking about pacing, it is important for this class that we're finding time for both the performance task and for review for the test. So the performance task will take about 3 weeks. It is 12 hours required in class, which usually will work out to about 3 weeks, maybe a little bit less than that. And you can do this at any point as long as you're done by the deadline, which is May 1st. You can do it towards the beginning, you can do it later on in April. It also does not need to be continuous. When I was teaching this course, I did it a couple times in like November, December, and then sometimes in January, February. For my students, January, February worked best for us because it was right after winter break, right at the beginning of a new semester. I did make it continuous, but you certainly don't have to. That definitely depends on your students. You could do 3 days a week working on this and then 2 days doing something else, as long as all of their time working on the performance task adds up to at least 12 hours in class. In addition to that, you should be leaving at least 2 to 3 weeks to review for the multiple choice exam. This class does cover a ton of material and stuff that's not all super related to itself. So it is a lot of material for them to remember. So giving a lot of review time is really helpful for students. At a lot of schools, this might be the first AP test that they're taking. At my school, it was freshmen that took this class. So they were really stressed out about taking an AP test. So as much review as you can give them to make them as confident as possible is super helpful. There have been a couple of updates this year. The biggest updates were a couple years ago. So there's just been a couple of small updates to our course on CodeHS this year. The performance task scoring guidelines are now updated to the most up-to-date version with College Board. It's a document that students can access when they're doing the practice for performance tasks. So that is the one that's being used by readers at College Board. And then we also have some additional tutorials on strings. There was a little bit of like a gap of understanding in strings. So we have some more scaffolding and more projects related to strings. Okay, so moving on to the actual performance task and how to prepare students for this. And this might seem like it's far away. It's not, you know, you're probably not doing it until later on in the year, but it is something to think about as you're planning out your year. You are required again to give 12 hours of classroom time. The program that the students write, they can write it in pairs, but the written responses they do have to complete independently. The program that they write does need input. It needs to process that input in some way, and then there does need to be some output. It doesn't necessarily need to be to the console. It's not that it needs to be they're typing something and the computer's printing something back out. It can be mouse clicks or input. It can be graphics that are moving, that's output, but it does need to have some sort of input and output. It does need to use at least one list or array list. And it does need to have one procedure function method that has a parameter. And that function does need to have sequencing, which is usually taken care of by just having a couple lines of code, selection, so some sort of if statement usually, and then iteration, so some sort of loop. And the most important part here is that students are able to describe what's happening in their program. When they submit their performance task, they're submitting a video of the program running. It does not need to be of every bit of the functionality of the program. It just needs to show input. There needs to be some sort of processing of that, and then there needs to be output. So the video does not need to be the entire code running. Sometimes students will stress out that they can't get the whole thing done in a minute. There is a minute maximum time, but it does not need to be the entire program. It can be just a snippet of it. They are also turning in the program code. And then most importantly, they're turning in their answers to the written responses about the program. The points that they're getting for the performance task are all based on that written response. And then there's 1 point for the video. So the most important part of this is definitely the written response. The performance task is due Monday, May 1st at midnight. We really would suggest that students not wait until then to turn it in. The entire country is turning them in at the same time. So it is possible it'll be a slow day on their site. We would suggest doing it earlier than that. I would suggest doing it a lot earlier than that, at least a couple weeks. But that is the last day to turn in, Monday, May 1st at midnight. So for the actual content, the most important parts, and these are things that students most often lose points for on the create task, they do need to include a list in some way in the program. They do need to have a procedure, again, that has a loop, an if statement, and they have to explain 2 different calls to that function that result in 2 different parts of the function being run. So I have on the next slide, I'll show you an example of code and what I mean by the calls getting to different portions of the code. Both the list and the procedure call cannot be trivial, so they have to somehow help the program run. The one place that students will lose, or the 2 points that students will lose with a list, a lot of students will make a list that just has 1 element, which does not help to manage the complexity of a program when they could have just used 1 variable. So a list would need to have more than 1 element in it to prove that it's managing the complexity of the program. And they do also need to use the data that's in the list. So some students will just refer to the length of the list instead of the elements in the actual list, which would not meet the requirements of the program. So this is just so I had an example in here of what I mean by calling 2 different parts of the function. You can ignore the syntax of this. I'll explain it as we go. So this is a function that is called isInList. I have a parameter that's an item and an array that has a bunch of items. So I'm just checking to see if this first parameter item is in this list all items. So it's going to go through the whole list. If it's in the list, it'll print out that item is in the list. It'll quit the function. If it gets through the entire list and doesn't find the item, then it'll print out item, whatever that item was, is not in the list. So if I had a list of fruits, so I had apple and banana and a long list of fruits as my all items array, some students will, for their 2 function calls, say, okay, I'm going to call it with apple as the first parameter, in which case it's going to print out apple is in the list. And my second call is going to be banana, and it's going to print out banana is in the list. Those are 2 different function calls, and they are printing out 2 different things, but they're accessing the same parts of the function. So students would need, in this case, you would want to have 1 function call that accesses this if statement and 1 that accesses this print statement at the end. So I would want to pass in apple as one of my options where we'll print apple is in the list, and then 1 that calls it with robot, and it'll say robot is not in the list. So they do need to give an example of 2 different function calls, but they do need to access 2 different parts of the code. When they submit, they're going to submit directly on College Board through the digital portfolio. There are practice options on AP Classroom where they can practice submitting the practice create tasks they do in the class through that system, so they can kind of get a feel for what it's going to be like when they submit the final one. You as the teacher will be able to see if they have submitted it as a draft or submitted it final, so you have access to all of their submissions, so you can make sure they're submitted correctly before the deadline. So in that formative performance task on College Board's website, they can practice uploading their video, practice writing the responses the same way they'll do them in the actual test or the actual task. And then you can grade any practice performance task so they can see what the grading will look like. You just cannot grade or give feedback on the actual one they're turning into College Board in a way that they could then use it and change it. You could grade it after the deadline, but you can't give them any feedback before the deadline. We do have some sample performance tasks available to you on that hub. So if I go back to the hub, which is one of these, there we go. If I go down to, there's a part that says APCSP prep. I'll see there's a bunch of sample performance tasks here. So I have 2 in JavaScript. I do have 2 in Python. There's only 3 that'll show up on this window. So to see the other Python one, I have to click into this Python one and it'll be at the bottom. So this will show you an example. This is all of the instructions. Then I have the code for the sample, the video for the sample, and then the written response for the sample. So you can show this to students. They can practice grading it to see what they think this student would have gotten. And then at the bottom, you'll see the scoring commentary where we show what we think that the student would have gotten. And so this is really helpful for students to see how that scoring guideline really matches up with their grade on the grade that they're going to get, and making sure that they're reading and being critical of the scoring guidelines as they're writing their responses. Again, all of these points are for their written responses, so that part is really the one to stress more so than the code, really. And if I go to the bottom of this Python one, I can see the other one is down here as well. We do also, again, have review material for the actual test, the multiple choice test. The difference with this class, because it is language agnostic, they are using pseudocode in all of their multiple choice questions that have code. So it is great for them to get practice with that pseudocode as they go through the course. If you wait until the review to show them that pseudocode, it's a big learning curve. So including these in-course practices that are already in our CodeHS courses will be helpful. You'll see instead of using input like they'd use in class, they're going to use display. So this will show them what a question might look like, and then these are the possible answers, and then they can practice those multiple choice questions. There is also an AP exam review unit already in the course, and then again, we talked about that review course that you can add in as well. That final exam is going to have 70 multiple choice questions. Some of those are single select, most of them are single select. A few of them are including a reading passage, and then they'll answer about that. And then we have some that are multi-select. So it'll be 4 possible options and they'll have to pick 2. There's no penalized, they're not penalized for guessing, so they should answer all 70 of them. And then the other 30% of their grade is that create performance task. We do also have a question of the day. If you go to codehs.com/QOTD/APCSP, you can see the question of the day. Students will see it on their left-hand menu under resources if they're enrolled in an APCSP course. So codehs.com/QOTD/APCSP. And if I go there, this is what I get. And I did answer this question already, but you'll see a question that's written in the style of the actual test. They'll have options. It'll tell them if they got it right or wrong. They can do it every day. And if they have a streak going, you'll see I have a little fire emoji and a 1 because I answered this one question. So I have a 1-day streak. So they can do those every day if you want that to be your warm up every day, or something that students are doing on their own, or something you're doing as a full class. And these are meant to line up with the actual course. So you'll never get, or you shouldn't get a question that you have not yet done in class, as long as you're at the same pace as the syllabus. Again, and we do have that CSP review course that you can add into your course as well. For the course audit process, this is something you would need to do to gain access to AP Classroom if you have not done it already. You do need to submit your syllabus to College Board. If you're using CodeHS, then you don't actually have to do that. You just tell them you're using CodeHS. It's a quicker process for you. When you go to submit your syllabus, you will choose adopt an endorsed provider syllabus, and you'll find the one that says CodeHS. And we have all 3 of those options. JavaScript, Python, and cybersecurity will all be listed there. So you can choose whichever version that you're using in class and submit that to College Board as your AP class audit. Your school administrator would need to approve it, and then College Board would need to approve it as well. So some important dates are, we would suggest, I know it's only 2 days from now, that you do that course audit as soon as possible so you can get your students access to that digital portfolio and AP Classroom. Students should be registered by, or need to be registered by November 15th of this year to be in the digital portfolio and AP Classroom. Again, that performance task is due Monday, May 1st. At midnight, but we would suggest finishing that a little bit earlier than that. And then the actual test is going to be Monday, May 8th at noon, your time. Oh yes, this is also, it's midnight Eastern time that the performance task is due. Your actual test is noon local time. There are also resources on AP Classroom. So once you have access to that, you'll see there's videos and questions. You can assign quizzes straight from here as well. Tons of resources on AP Classroom once you have access to that. And lastly, we do have this one last link. This is going to have a bunch of resources on it. So this will give you College Board information, information about the syllabi for each of those courses, how to do that course audit, what the digital portfolio looks like, the performance task, basically everything that's we went over today will be in this resources page. That's codehs.com/APCSP_resources. And we do have a few more webinars left this webinar season. You can get to those at codehs.com/webinars. We have one tomorrow about using CodeHS Pro to track student progress. We have one on blended learning and one on integrating coding across other subjects next week. And then if you want more information, you can go to codehs.com/learn more, and somebody from our team will answer any questions you have. We also have a ton of other ways you can get connected with other CodeHS teachers. So we have a community on Slack that you can join. We have a Facebook educators group. You can follow us on social media at CodeHS. And then we also have options for you to become a CodeHS certified educator or earn a micro-credential in a specific language. And then lastly, we do sometimes have other, usually in the summer, but they will continue throughout the year, some more free CodeHS or teacher-led workshops where they're a little bit more interactive, usually a couple hours for those. And that is all we have for you. Thank you so much for joining. If you have any more questions, we'll keep this room open for a second so you can ask any of those in the Q&A. And yes, thank you for joining and good luck teaching APCSP this year.